Okay, welcome to part 2 of using a freeze dryer as a vacuum packer. I've discovered a few things over the course of the last few weeks that you need to know. Okay, basically I've been wasting my time over the last month doing a lot of things so that you don't have to waste yours. I'm Evan Rowell, and this is Critical Thinking. Okay, over the course of the last month, it's been about a month since I've put a video up. I have been doing a lot of experimentation with a lot of different things that for me represented challenges because I've seen other people try to do things and have a hard time with them, and so I decided to take up the mantle and see what I could do. And for the whole process, during the whole time that I've been working, something was nagging me, something was really bugging me, and it wasn't until recently that I discovered exactly what it was that's bugging me. And what it was that I was wasting a lot of time pursuing a lot of things with my freeze dryer that were absolutely useless, things that I would never use. And basically, I guess I was just looking for bragging rights, saying that, I figured out a way to do this, I figured out a way to do that. And I basically, I failed at a lot of things too. I kept pursuing, I kept doing things differently, and it was just so frustrating. And therefore I've decided to change my angle a little bit. I'm not going to be doing things unless it's information that you can really use, okay? But before I do that, I want to jump back on my chopsticks here and how it works with the freeze dryer. Now, one of the problems that I was having using the binder clip like this and without anything else was that the bag, as it ballooned up, even between the two pans, the ends of the bag would balloon up, and it would balloon up enough to pop this clip off, or at least move it so that it wouldn't hold the vacuum when I released it. And so I was trying to figure out, what I could do. And I started thinking about the chopsticks idea that I had, and in my last video I show you how to make these, and I thought, I wonder if I could adapt one of these chopsticks down to where I could use it in conjunction with the barrel clip here and stop that barrel clip from popping off, and it's worked out very, very successfully. Okay, what I did was I took the chopsticks and I cut them basically about in half, and then I sanded the end down into a little bit of point so that this O-ring that you can see right here was able to slip over the top of it. And these O-rings, I had somebody ask me exactly what size of these O-rings. These are number 31. They come 10 to a pack. They're 9/16 outside diameter by 5/16 inside diameter by 1/8 inch thick. So considering how small they are, these are pretty heavy duty. These are the chopsticks that I use. I get these, they're 24 in a pack, for $3.23 at Walmart, and they work really, really well. Okay, so what I want to show you here is how this chopstick went on the edge of this bag. Now I sealed this bag already. I'm already done with this. But what I did was I put the chopstick on in a diagonal after I'd cut the corner, and then I put the barrel clip on it like this, right up against that chopstick. And that basically prevented any expansion in the bag from popping the clip off. Okay? And then, as a matter of fact, that holds that vacuum in there so well once it's vacuum packed that I was able to take this out of the freeze dryer and hang on to it. I was able to bring it in here where my impulse sealer was and seal the bag. Now, what I like about this is even though I would take the barrel clip off, this chopstick here was still able to hold the vacuum in here. Now, I would imagine that, given enough time, eventually you'd have lost it. But what I like about this chopstick here is you can see this chopstick will fit right up against the edge of that impulse sealer. I don't even have to take it off. Then I can put my impulse seal down, and I can seal that bag. This bag's already been sealed, so I'm not going to do it. But once it's sealed, then you can go ahead and remove the chopstick, and it will maintain your vacuum. So these chopsticks work very, very well, and I'm very pleased with it. But now I have to discuss with you something that happened or that I noticed, and it's a problem with using your freeze dryer as a vacuum packer. Okay, it's not insurmountable, but during my experimentation, I was using the freeze dryer so often that something happened, and I want to show it to you. Take a look at this picture. This picture right here is 2 oil changes. And you see how black that oil is? When I eventually filtered that oil, the oil was still good, but it had particulate in it. It was muddy, and on the top of my Brita oil filter, although the oil was able to go through it and it was filtered just fine and it was just perfectly good oil, it left a black sludge across the top. And I said, what is going on? Okay. And it dawned on me that when one of these bags, when you put it in a vacuum packer, even with the clip and the chopstick, that pressure inside of that bag will build up, and it will begin to blow out the hole that you've created for that very purpose. But more than just air comes out of that hole. Maybe you can't see it, and maybe it happens so seldom that, or at least so little, that you can't see it. But after you vacuum packed, 8 or 10 bags, you're going to get some particulate out there that's going to be in your, it's going to be in the air that the vacuum pump is going to suck in. Okay, and that's what was happening. I believe that that's what was happening. And once that starts to happen, then your oil is going to get really dirty really fast. It's going to turn black, like that picture I showed you. And it took me, probably 3 to 4 oil changes consecutive in a row to the point where I could get that oil to come out of there. As a matter of fact, I did take the cover off of the oil-filled oil pump or vacuum pump, and I scrubbed the inside of it, and I cleaned it, and I'll tell you what, I got some dirty water out of there, or some dirty oil out of there. And the thing is I do change my oil every time, between every batch, and especially if I follow up a batch with by vacuum packing after I'm done with a batch. And I drain the oil, and it looks a little bit funny sometimes, but filtering it out and cleans it up real good. What I didn't consider was that when that oil was coming out of there, I wasn't getting 100% of that particulate. It was still coating the inside of there. Letting it get that bad or letting it suck up that much particulate would have meant that I would have had to have taken the vacuum pump apart and cleaned out that oil chamber, that oil pan, every time I used it as a vacuum pump or as a vacuum packer. And I thought, I didn't want to do that. It was kind of disheartening because I thought, well, maybe there's a good reason that you don't want to be using your freeze dryer as a vacuum packer. And then it dawned on me that all you need to do is filter that air before it reaches the vacuum pump. Now, I haven't set up a system yet, or I should say a unit that I can draw the vacuum through before I draw it in the chamber of the freeze dryer. So what I did was I hit upon this idea. I want you to take a look at this picture. Now you're going to see a yellow cloth back there, and there's a 1/2-inch wooden dowel sticking out of it that I used to push a clean yellow face cloth, a terry cloth rag, and I pushed it in there. Now I used a terry cloth rag. I won't use paper because paper in particular can get sucked into the vacuum pack or the vacuum pump, and you don't want that. So I used a very large, a standard size face cloth, and I pushed it in there with that 1/2-inch dowel, And the reason I used a large one is because that way the vacuum pump couldn't suck the whole thing in. Okay, but it did provide a kind of a filter for any particulates that might be escaping these bags. Now take a look at this picture here. I didn't leave the wooden dowel in there. Okay, I found that if I pushed that cloth back in there far enough, that the wooden dowel wasn't necessary, and it wouldn't impede the vacuum packing process. So with that, now since I've been doing that, I haven't had that problem with the oil. It still comes out. I still change it every time, and there's still some discoloration. But that cloth being stuck back in there like that during the vacuum packing process seems to have eliminated that problem of particulate getting stuck back into the vacuum pump. And I intend to investigate how I can put together an exterior canister with a filter medium inside of it so that I can draw my vacuum through it, and any particulate that might get sucked into that vacuum chamber or into that vacuum line won't end up in the vacuum packer or into the vacuum pump. So with that, these chopsticks have become invaluable to me. Like I had mentioned before, one of the other things that I do with them is if I have a bag like this that's filled up to the top and it's difficult to hold that top, when I want to seal it on the impulse sealer, I will put that chopstick across there, and I'll put that little O-ring on there, and that'll hold that. And even as long as that is, this impulse sealer again is I can impulse seal that down with that stick on there. So that chopstick has become an invaluable tool to me. And I show you in the last part 1 of this series how to make those chopsticks, and it works really, really well. Okay, so let's talk about what I've been doing over the last month to absolutely waste my time. Okay, so what I have here is what I call torpedo tubes. Now, I was out in my garage a while back, and I found a piece of 4-inch Schedule 40 PVC, and I got to looking at it, and I was thinking, hey, you know, right now I'm using 2 pans to clamp bags together to prevent them from expanding. I wonder if this would work. Okay, I wonder if I can roll the bags up and put them inside of here, and you know, sure enough, you can. You put the bag inside of there, and what I found was kind of neat about it is you can put up to 5 of these things in your freeze dryer. And take a look at this picture. It's showing that you can put 5 of these things inside of there, and you can roll up 5 bags, and you can do 5 bags all at the same time. And with this chopstick and clip on there, you can pull this out of there and it will maintain its vacuum, and you can come along again, take the clip off, you won't lose your vacuum, and you can seal that, and you know, so the vacuum, so you don't lose your vacuum, and then you can go ahead and pull that clip off of there. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, you know, oh, and you wouldn't, I was saying, what's the point of doing this? Why would somebody want to do this? Now, I've used this, I've got in here something called pearl couscous. It's basically a toasted Israeli-style wheat or pasta. And it's kind of neat because you can stack them, okay? If you've got space constraints that would make it so that this is a better way to go, or even I thought if you use a smaller one of these, you can create these for backpacking because they'll stand up straight inside of a backpack. And I thought, well, you know, the more I look at this, the more I realize that this is kind of pointless, okay? A flat bag, sit in box, it'll store. It'll do wonderfully, and this is a lot of to-do, a lot of setup that's not really necessary. So I'm going to leave that. I'm going to leave this up to you as to whether or not you think kind of a torpedo tube vacuum pack is worth the effort, because you can't really, you can only put in here what you can stuff in this 4-inch round circle, and if you've got solid material in your bag, it's I don't know. For me, when all was said and done, this was for me a waste of time. But I thought I'd show it to you so I can let you know that there are different ways that you can prevent the expansion inside your freeze dryer if you want to use it as a vacuum packer. Okay? With that, let's move on to the next one. Okay, the next thing that I wasted a lot of time on was hot dogs. Anybody that's ever tried to do a hot dog knows that if you try to just stick a hot dog in your freeze dryer, it'll come out looking like something out of a Jimmy John's package, and it'll be dry, it'll be shriveled, and it'll be oily. And I thought, okay, now there's a challenge. I want to see what I can do with it. So what I did was I got the idea, I started thinking outside the box. And I thought, well, maybe if you chop the hot dog up, let's see what happens there. And I did. I chopped that hot dog up into little pieces. As a matter of fact, I used a food processor and I chopped it up in little pieces. And it worked, except for there was still a lot of oil. I'm thinking, well, that kind of defeats that purpose. I need to do something to get rid of the oil. Now, before, I had tried pre-cooking the whole hot dog, boiling it real good so I could maybe boil the oil out of it, and that didn't work either, because there was still enough oil left on the inside that it shriveled everything up, and it was a complete flop. It was a failure. But not to be defeated by it, I thought, well, let's try something different. Let's not just boil it or chop it up. I mean, what we want to do is we want to freeze dry hot dogs because we like the flavor of hot dogs. And I thought, why does a hot dog have to be in a tube? So the first thing I did was I took the hot dog and I ground it up in the food processor, and then I put it in boiling water and boiled it. And these right here are Ballpark Franks, and I boiled it until there was, until it was completely cooked, and there was you could see the sheen of oil on top of the water, and I got rid of that. And then I thought, when you freeze drying it, one of the problem is that the oil, there's going to be oil. So just in case there was any oil left, what I did, and you can see this here, this is going to make a mess. What I did was I laid out a piece of cotton cloth, and I put the hot dog material across the top of it, and then, as you can see, I just unrolled it. I rolled it back up again. And my reasoning was that if there's going to be any oil in there, as the freeze drying process continues, that cotton cloth is going to soak up the oil. Well, as it turns out, there was no oil. Grinding it up, and then cooking it was sufficient to completely boil off all the oil. And so what we got here was just kind of hot dog pellets. They're not bad, and they do taste like dried hot dog. But when I rehydrated it, it still didn't rehydrate very well. And that kind of and it took 2 days. And that kind of bummed me out. So I'm going to try again. And this time it was even more successful. Now, since there was no oil in that cloth, I thought, well, okay, I don't need to use that cloth again. But this time I took hot dogs. As a matter of fact, this is a Polish sausage, and this is Hebrew National hot dogs, which are my favorite hot dogs because, I trust what's in Hebrew National. They're high quality. They're twice as expensive. Sometimes it's 3 times what a Ballpark Frank will be. But instead of just chopping it up in a food processor, I ran it through my meat grinder. on my KitchenAid. I just ran them hot dogs down inside of there, and it came out, and it looked like ground meat. And then I boiled it, and then I freeze dried it, and then I submerged it in water. And sure enough, after about 12 hours, it had completely rehydrated. The problem was this: it was flavorless. I had boiled all the flavor out of it. There was a little bit left, but I really didn't like it. And so I come across the idea of, after I boiled it, before I freeze dried it, I would put seasonings in it. And I found these bratwurst and sausage seasonings packages, and I put seasoning back in it, and that worked really well. So there, I got the flavor back. This was before I freeze dried it. I mixed this seasoning with it, and it worked pretty well. The problem being, again, actually there were two problems. First problem was, although it rehydrated, and I was able to put it in a hot dog bun with the ketchup and the mustard and everything else you usually do, and it did taste somewhat like a hot dog, so I consider it to be a partial success story, but the texture was wrong. Even though it rehydrated, it was still tough. It didn't have that hot doggy texture to it that people love so well. And the second problem was, as I got to looking at this, and I'm thinking, this is hot dogs. If you just got to have hot dogs, this is the way to do it. Grind it up in a meat grinder, but who cares? I thought, this is a waste of time. There was a lot of time and a lot of energy put into doing hot dogs to come up with this dried hot dog granules, just so that I can put together a hot dog with ketchup and mustard and everything and eat it out of a hot dog bun. It just wasn't something that excited me anymore. I just don't think it's worth the effort. It destroys the hot dog. It changes it. You got to do a lot of stuff. There's a lot of time. There's a lot of effort, and a lot of weird different ways and things you can do to try to make that hot dog work. But the bottom line is this: do you really want a freeze-dried hot dog if it takes that much time and changes the hot dog that much to get it to freeze dry? Okay, me, I'm sitting here thinking, God, if you want to be into it that much, just get yourself some pork and get yourself some beef and get yourself whatever it takes to make a hot dog, freeze dry that, and then rehydrate it, and then make yourself a hot dog, get your seasonings and all that other kind of stuff. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me to do it. So I'm not going to do it. I'm finished with hot dogs. I don't think they work. I don't think they can be done. I think there's just too much oil, there's too much effort, and there's too much hullabaloo that you need to go through to get it to work. So with that, hot dogs are out. For me, it was a waste of time, but at least now I know, and now you know, that unless you can figure out a way to freeze dry hot dogs, and there's been a lot of people out there that have worked really hard trying to figure out a way to freeze dry a hot dog so that it will go long-term storage so that you can rehydrate it. A hot dog meat is kind of like, it changes when you cook it, when it's made into a hot dog. Much the same way that, tires, once a tire is made with the rubber, you can't just melt the tire down and make another tire out of it. That doesn't happen. It changes chemically. The physical properties change, and I believe that is the same thing that happens with a hot dog. Once that hot dog is made, you can't mess with it. You can't change it. You can't grind it. You can't freeze dry it. You can't freeze it. You can't dehydrate it. You can't do any of this stuff to it and expect to get back what you started with. So with that to me was a waste of time, but I did find out, and at least I can say I tried. Okay? So let's go on to the next one. Bread. Okay, here we've got bread. And I was just talking about hot dogs. oddly enough, I want to show you a hot dog bun that I freeze dried and that I successfully rehydrated. Okay? This is a hot dog bun. You can see it's soft. It smells like a hot dog bun. It settles, it separates like a hot dog bun. And I broke this in half while it was still dry. But what I did, and I tried several different ways to do this, was I figured, the problem that everybody's been having with bread is they're trying to introduce the moisture from the outside of the bread and hoping that the bread will suck it in. Bread will eventually draw in the moisture, but it's a very long process. And so I thought, hey, why don't I, after I freeze dry it, let's take a meat injector and let's inject the water into the middle of the hot dog bun. And it worked. It really did, except for it took a long time. Okay, I injected it in there and I was hoping I could come back in a few hours and that hot dog bun would be restored. It wasn't. I even tried these bratwurst rolls, and again, it worked. You can see it just as soft as can be. Flavor is still there, and this was one time this was freeze dried. And what I did was I took that meat injector with water in it, and I injected a little bit of water in 5 different spots along that, and then I put it in this bag along with this bun and this one here, and I put it in the refrigerator. And 5 days later, it was done. And so I'm thinking, wow, this is crazy. This is a little bit of bread. You want hot dogs? Well, just put yourself some yeast and some oil and eggs and flour together, or make sure that it's in your pantry, or store it long term. You can dry the eggs. Yeast will keep for a long time if it's vacuum packed. And make your own bread. Okay, don't worry about freeze drying hot dog buns. It's just not worth the effort. The cost in energy and time and effort and everything, just so that you can have a hot dog bun that you could make yourself when the time comes, it just really isn't worth the effort. Now, bread, I thought I had a real success story here. What I did was I took the Rhodes bacon serve bread rolls. You've seen them. You can get them in the grocer's freezer, and they come in 1 pound loaves. And you take them and you put them in a bread pan with a cover on it, and they will thaw, and then they will expand, and you can bake them. And what I did was I took I took 3 of them, and I let them thaw just enough to where they could be cut. And this is what the piece looks like. Okay, I laid them down in the pan, and I was able to put 2 pounds, 2 rolls into 1 pan, and so I did two pans worth, and they came out, and they're hard. And I thought, okay, well, now that I have this, what do I do? What am I going to do with it? Because I tried just throwing these in some water and seeing if it would rehydrate. They don't. Okay, they stay as hard as a hockey puck for as long as you want it in there. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to grind it. I'm going to have to crush them. So I took a bunch of them and I crushed them up, and even the small pieces of the freeze-dried bread dough, they wouldn't rehydrate real quick, as a matter of fact. So what I had to do was I ended up getting a wheat grinder, a coffee grinder, and crushing these things up a little bit and feeding it through the coffee grinder until I got this powder. This looks like flour again. And I got to looking at it and going, well, all right, now this was a 1 pound, this is what a 1 pound Rhodes bacon serve loaf looks like after it's freeze dried, and it doesn't weigh a pound. As a matter of fact, this only weighs 8 ounces. And so the idea was to just go ahead and put 8 more ounces of water on top of that, and so you've got your 1 pound loaf again. And it rehydrated very quickly this way. I was able to rehydrate it and mix it around. I mixed it around with my hand and everything, and inside of an hour, I had, well, it wasn't bread dough. It was really, really loose. Okay, it almost looked like melted white chocolate. But not to be, I had 3 or 4 of these already made up. So the next one, I only put in half as much water, and I mixed it around, and it came out fairly good. It came out fairly. It was a lot thicker than the first one, but I didn't put as much water into it as it lost, and that concerned me. So the third bag that I had, I put in even less water, to the point where I was able to make it into a sticky bread dough, much like you would expect any bread dough to be after you make it, before you put it into a pan and let it rise. And so I thought, okay, so I put all 4 of these bags in a nice, not hot, but a nice warm area, the bags that I had done these with, and they didn't rise. Apparently, yeast, if you abuse the yeast, I researched this a little bit, the yeast will die. Okay, so this was a complete waste of time. I thought maybe I could get as many as 24 loaves of bread in one batch if this worked. And it just didn't work. And even if it did, this just isn't worth the time or the effort. Okay? Again, bread is not something that you want to freeze dry. Because if you freeze dry it, it's hard to reconstitute it. It's hard to make it soft again. It never comes back the way that it was before you freeze dried it. And that may be true of just about everything you freeze dry, but to some extent. But bread is to a great extent, and I just don't like it. And so again, that was another waste of time trying to do bread. Like I say, I was able to do hot dog buns, and it's a perfectly good bun, and it came back. It's soft. It feels like a hot dog bun. It even tastes somewhat like a hot dog bun. But the idea here is why. Excuse me, I'm going to chew that. That didn't chew like a hot dog bun. Why? Why was I doing all of this? Why was I trying to show people how to do things that I wouldn't recommend that they do? Okay? I'm showing you how to do a vacuum pack and a freeze dryer with a PVC tube, and I'll never do it again. I can't see any reason why I would, but now that you can use just about anything. You can build your own boxes. Okay, you don't have to use metal trays. You can build boxes with a top on it or something. I don't know, just use your imagination. I'm sitting here going, why do I freeze dry bread when I'll just never do it? This was the same thing. I've tried it, I experimented with it, it failed, and I'll never do that again. So what I'm going to do from now on is I'm switching gears. I'm not going to take things as a challenge when it's been demonstrated that the challenge isn't worthwhile. Okay, I'm going to shift my focus and my attention, trying to help people use their freeze dryer efficiently and cost effectively, so that the end product, when the user comes along in however many years to use it, has something that they can actually use, something that you can store, something that you can feel confident that you're not wasting your time with. And so with that, I'll end this here. I've had several other projects that I did the same thing to. A lot of experimentation, trying to do things that really aren't necessary. I was doing condiments. I tried a whole bunch of different ways of doing condiments. Mustard does really well. Ketchup does fairly well. But then again, I'm sitting here thinking, I have food storage that I do more than freeze dry. part of the process of being a prepper, of being prepared for the days that the stores don't have any food on their shelves, is having a store of food, and it all doesn't have to be freeze dried. Now I'm going to put together a video very soon, and I'm going to talk about what I have learned in my 30 some odd years of being a prepper, and what I have learned about what you should freeze dry, what you shouldn't, what you should store and what you shouldn't, what is long-term storage, what's short-term storage. I'm working on that one right now because I think that that is something that people will appreciate knowing. I'm also going to talk to people about what I've learned about where to store food in your house when you don't think that there's any place that you can store it. I think you would be surprised at how many different places in your house you can hide things if you just think critically. So with that, I'm Evan Rowell, and this is Thinking Critically about wasting your time.